Did you just get your PSAT scores back and are you wondering, what does this score mean anyway? Is it good? Is it not good? Then you have come to the right video. We are going to discuss today what your PSAT score means. Before we get going, I recommend that all of you subscribe to our channel. All you have to do is click subscribe below this video and head to SupertutorTV.com/subscribe and subscribe to our mailing list. While you're there, you might also check out our awesome Best ACT Prep course ever, which is a complete prep series for the ACT. Without further ado, let's get into this video. So, PSAT scores came out this week. And to answer your question, what a good PSAT score is, well, it kind of depends on what grade you're in. Because depending on what grade you're in, PSAT scores vary pretty widely. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pull up like a fake PSAT score report. And I'm just going to show you kind of like how to basically read your PSAT score report, okay? So you should have gotten this lovely page, a bunch of pages. It looks something like this. The most important page is this page here. And this is basically what your score report's going to look like when you pull it up from online. And over here you have your evidence-based reading and writing score. Here you have your math score, and then you have your total score. Below each of those, you're going to have a sample percentile. Now here's what you have to keep in mind. This sample percentile is based on your grade. So if you're a sophomore and you're at, say, 51st percentile, that does not mean if you took the SAT today, you would walk in and be in the 51st percentile on the SAT. Au contraire. It just means that you're in the 51st percentile of people who are as far into school as you are right now. The other thing that they are telling you right here is keep in mind that the PSAT and the SAT are on the same scale. And what they mean by that is the College Board is estimating that your SAT score would be 960 if you took your SAT today. But what you guys might notice is that the PSAT is actually out of 1520. If you look over here, do you see how that says 1520? And each section is out of 760. That's actually different from the SAT because the SAT is out of 800 per section and out of 1600 total. So what gives? Why did the College Board do this? Well, we can't be exactly sure, but my guess is that the College Board did this because what happened in the past, because the PSAT is a shorter test than the SAT, what I saw happen to a lot of students is they would get a really great PSAT score and then their SAT score would be lower and kids would be falsely secure feeling from their wonderful PSAT score. And so I think what the College Board is trying to do is stop that effect from happening and try to give people a benchmark for kind of where they're at, but estimate it a little bit lower than what their actual score is to encourage people to be prepared. So if you look at your PSAT percentile breakdown, like I said, the percentiles between sophomores and juniors are vastly different. And I'm just going to give you guys like a quick example so you can see what that means. So here we have percentiles for total scores. And if you look at this like here in 10th grade versus 11th grade, right? If you're in 10th grade, you're in the 99th percentile if you get a 1360, right? But if you're in the 11th grade, that's only the 95th percentile. So do you see that differential? And that differential becomes even more drastic when we go down the line. For example, here, you could be in the 71st percentile with a 1030 sophomore year, but you're in the 54th percentile as a junior. So that's a pretty big divide. That's a 17 percentage point divide. And part of this differential comes down to the fact that you should be learning in high school, particularly in the math section. You'll see that math scores generally go up because people are more prepared for the math once they get to higher level math, because the math on the PSAT does go up through about pre-calculus or trig, some of that kind of stuff. So if you haven't had those classes yet, it can be hard to do really well in the test because you haven't even learned things yet, right? Now, if you're in higher level math classes, you might be a little bit wary if you're only a sophomore and you think, oh, I can just sit back. I'm like 81st percentile. I'm doing super awesome. I got an 1100. I have nothing to worry about. I wouldn't say that you have nothing to worry about because if you already took pre-calculus and you're only at the 81st percentile here, look what happens next year when everybody else has already taken pre-calc and they catch up to you. You dip down to like 67th percentile. So you can't just assume that you're perfectly fine sophomore year if you're in a relatively okay percentile. You might want to also look at the junior percentiles and just see, okay, I'm going to have to improve between now and when I take it junior year in order to hold this ground, okay? So that's just something to keep in mind. The other thing is not all 10th graders take this test. So just some more food for thought. Your competition pool might be a little bit different. So now what I'm going to do, the next portion of the video, I'm going to basically walk you guys through sort of benchmark what a good PSAT score is and what you want to be aiming for on the PSAT in order to get you ready for college. Now, the great thing about the PSAT is it is pretty much just practice, and the only people it really matters for in the long run are people who are top scoring, top 2% of juniors who can qualify for national merit scholarship competition or commended student status. And that's just a cool bragging kind of thing you can put on your college application. That's all it is. And also it's an opportunity to get a little bit of money for college, but most of those scholarships are pretty modest with the exception of some full rides available at schools like USC and some second tier schools and things like that, as well as state schools across the nation, but that just depends on what state you're in. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to talk about what is a good PSAT score? Well, to have a decent PSAT score, you've got to at least reach what they call the benchmark for college readiness. And what is the benchmark for college readiness? Well, the College Board calls this what predicts a 75% likelihood of achieving a C or higher in related first semester credit-bearing college courses. In other words, you have a 3 out of 4 chance of not flunking out of college if you reach these benchmarks on the PSAT or the SAT. Cool? Cool. Okay, so let's take a look at what those benchmarks are. I created this concordance table. This concordance table doesn't actually exist. Here's what I did. I'm going to tell you my methodology. I took the PSAT chart, which has the percentile of 11th grade test takers, 11th grade national sample, 10th grade test takers, and 10th grade national sample. Just to make things a little bit easier, usually the test takers are more competitive than a national sample because people who are not college bound are more likely the people who aren't going to take the PSAT. And so you're just getting rid of people who don't really want to take the SAT or the PSAT anyway. So I really am just going to look at the percentiles among people who are taking this test and taking the SAT. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to focus more on the 11th grade column because this test was designed mostly for juniors to kind of get a benchmark on where they're at. If you're a sophomore, it just means that you have a little bit more time to improve. And so you're going to be in a higher percentile with a lower score and you have a little bit more time to catch up. Okay, and what I've done is I took the percentiles here for 11th grade test takers and I lined it up with the SAT chart based on SAT test taker percentiles. And then what I did is I laid out all of the SAT scores that correspond with the PSAT scores of that same percentile. So is this exactly what you would get if you say got a 1520 on the PSAT? If you went and took the SAT today, would you get a 1580 to a 1600? Maybe, maybe not. Can I guarantee that? Absolutely no. And the College Board even says that they expect a variance of your scores somewhere in the range of about 30 points per section or 40 points overall on the exam. So the first benchmark I'm going to talk about is the sophomore benchmark. And the sophomore benchmark for combined scores is a 910. What that means is if you're a sophomore, you want to be scoring at least a 910 on the SAT if you want to go to college. And if you're not, you really need to think about how I'm going to study for this thing no matter what. Now, what does a 910 correlate with on the real SAT? Well, the same percentile among juniors corresponds with about a 960 on the real SAT. So if you got a 910, you can expect to get around a 960. And if you guys watch my other video on what's a good SAT score, what I always like to see as a benchmark is about 1,000, right, on the SAT. And if you see up here, this 970 is the junior benchmark. So that means if you're a junior, you want to be scoring at a 970 or above on your PSAT, and that corresponds with about a 1020, maybe a 1010 on your regular SAT. So that's our first benchmark. Let's look at our next band. The next band I would say is if you want to go to like a pretty good school, like a school you've heard of, maybe your local state school if you're not in a super competitive state like Michigan or North Carolina or Illinois. If you're in a more traditional state that has some state schools that aren't quite as competitive, this could be enough for you. And that would be getting about an 1150 on your PSAT and about a 1200 on your SAT would be about equivalent to that. And again, this is for juniors. If you are a sophomore, right, we could look down here and you could be in the 75th percentile there, and you might only have a 1050. And then that 1050, right, is 75th percentile. That would possibly correspond to a 1200 on the SAT a year and a half later, if you play your cards right, yeah? Okay, next here is what I call like your competitive colleges, right? If you wanna go to a top 50 school, maybe a top 30 school, the back end of that, and you've got some decent grades, I wanna see at least about a 1360 on your PSAT And then that can turn into about a 1400 on your SAT. And of course, these correspondences are probably with very little prep because a lot of people aren't prepping for these tests, okay? If you're looking to go into really competitive schools though, let's say top 20 schools, I'm going to want to see above a 1500 on your SAT, and that means above a 1460 junior year on your PSAT. Again, this is like 99th percentile among 11th graders. What's 99th percentile among 10th graders? Well, that's way down here. That's like a 1390. So if you're a sophomore and you've got like a 1390, that might be pretty easy to turn into a 1500 on a real SAT. Give yourself a year, give yourself some more math, practice a little bit, and you could very easily get from there to there. Do you see? Because that was 99th percentile, right in the smack center of it. And then what if you want to go to like a top 10 school, a top 5 school, something like that? Well, then I want to see above a 1500 on your PSAT if possible. I want to see students who are probably qualifying for the National Merit Scholarship Competition commended student status, if not as a semifinalist for the National Merit Scholarship Competition. And that is going to translate to an SAT score of about 1550 to 1560 or above. And this is really your top tier schools. If your PSAT is above a 1500, you are in really good shape, okay? But even if you're at like a 1460 or a 1450, you could very well be a commended student. So let's talk about commended student status and national merit, because I know some of you are probably wondering about that. Do I qualify for national merit? What do I have to get to qualify for it? And so what I have is I have another chart, which is a bunch of estimates, okay? And this is by state, because the way that the National Merit Scholarship Competition works is that there's a different number, basically, they call this a selection index for every state that qualifies students for National Merit Scholarship Competition awards and for scholarships, okay? Let's just talk about where this comes from and how this works. So National Merit Corporation. So this is the page that you're going to have a National Merit Scholarship Corporation selection index. FYI, if you're a sophomore, you don't get a selection index because you're not eligible for this, okay? Now you can still calculate if you're a sophomore what it would have been if you were a junior, and I'm going to tell you how to do that in a minute, but you will not get a selection index because you are not a junior. The other thing that I'll say is if you are an international student, you do not qualify for national merit scholarships either. So you also will not get a selection index. This is for domestic American students only who are juniors, okay? Here's how it works. This selection index is formed by taking my reading and writing score, divide by 10, and that equals 43. So that's our reading and writing base score, okay? And then I multiply that by 2, okay? And then that equals 86. And then I add the math score divided by 10, which is 53. And so what we do is we do 86 plus 53, and that equals 139, okay? And that's called your selection index. Your reading and writing counts double. So if you did really well in that section, you are more likely to be a National Merit Scholar, okay? So let's go down here and let's actually pretend like we're maybe in range for national merit, and let's make up a new score, okay? So let's say your evidence-based reading and writing, let's say you got a 730, and let's say you got a 750 on your math, okay? So this is an actual score that very well could make you a National Merit Scholar, okay? So we're looking at this. Basically, you missed 1 question on the math and maybe 3 questions on the reading, something like that, okay? So that would be a 221. So let's look at 221. And now we're going to go to my awesome spreadsheet of predictions based on your state, okay? So here's my awesome spreadsheet based on predictions. So here's how this works. These are the scores that qualified kids in these states last year. These are the scores that qualified people 2 years ago. And we don't have data really reaching back beyond that because this test changed. And then this is our predicted score range for this year, and it might be right, it might be wrong. So you saw how that score that I just got, where I missed like 1 on the math and like 3 on the reading and writing, gave me a 221. Okay, so we can check that out, and it looks like Connecticut, 221 will totally fly. Probably. We're not sure. And in Colorado, I would be. But guess what? In California, nope. Screwed over. And in Maryland, Maryland's the worst, everybody. If you live in Maryland, I'm sorry. 222. Massachusetts, 222, another terrible state. And the worst, oh my gosh, New Jersey, 223. You people in New Jersey have to stop studying to make it easier on everyone else. But the lucky end of this spectrum is West Virginia. 212 is predicted for this year. Last year it was a 211. US territories, that's like a 212. That means if you live in like Puerto Rico. Now, what do you have to do to be a commended student? Well, usually you need to be the lowest number in this column, right? Which again, these are predictions. We don't know yet what the cutoff's going to be. But we do know that it's probably only going to get more and more competitive every year. So there's your ranges. You can pause this video if you see your state and look it up. And this is the range that we think it will be. This is the predicted, and this is last year's. So it's probably not going to be below last year's. At least that much we can gander. And commended students, I would say the commended student cutoff, I would estimate is going to be somewhere between 211 and 214. And it really just depends on how everybody else in the country does. And again, it really comes down to what you get on the verbal versus on the math. If you do a lot better on the verbal, you're in a better standing position. So I think that's about it. That's what you have to do for National Merit. In terms of National Merit scholarship stuff, if you want to get a scholarship from National Merit, you also have to retake the SAT, and you have to get a score that's like within Dodge, like over around 700 on each section to confirm that that was you that took the PSAT and did that well. So now let's wrap all this up and ask ourselves, what do I do with this information and where do I go from here? So what I will say is if you have just taken the PSAT, the best thing to do with this information is to try to figure out whether you will take the SAT or the ACT. And the best way to do that is now that you have a baseline that's in the SAT score range and you can estimate your SAT score from your PSAT score, you can go and take an ACT test and see how you do on that. Some schools offer a practice ACT. If your school already did and you have that score, brilliant. Go get that out, and then you can compare these two in a concordance table. But if your school didn't offer that, what I recommend that you do is go to ACT.org, download the official free ACT practice test, take it timed, and score it, and see how you do. And I really recommend that you print it out on paper, because taking it on paper is different from taking it off a screen. If you can afford the paper and print it out, that's usually the best way to do it. And then after you have that ACT score, you're gonna come back and compare it to your PSAT score, and then make a decision which one are you doing better on, and then you can kind of figure out what your prep game plan is. Winter break is the perfect time to do this. So I know you guys are probably all studying for finals or midterms or like having too many projects from all your teachers right now, but give yourself a couple weeks, sit down, take a practice ACT, see how you do, and then come back to our blog based on this video, and we will put up a concordance table for you guys so you can check out whether you should take the SAT or the ACT based on your scores, and so you can get yourself on a prep journey. And whichever test that you choose, we have lots of videos here at SupertutorTV.com to help you out. And if you're taking the ACT, we even have a complete prep series for the ACT. If you're sophomores, we'll even probably have a complete series for the SAT by the time you're juniors. So come back and check next fall, and we should have a complete SAT prep then as well. But for you guys who are current juniors, go figure that out. Come back to the blog associated with this video, check out our concordance table, and start your prep journey. And then you can take it from there. We have lots more videos to help you guys out if this is the journey you're starting. So make sure you subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. And I will see you guys next time. Take care.